So Python and Tuesday.py. It ran silently. Does that mean A, it's correct, or B, it's not actually doing anything? Take a close look. Is it actually running the tests? I mean, there's no output to tell me it did anything. That either means all the asserts passed and it made no complaints, or the program didn't even run. Okay. Let me change those assert statements to print statements. Okay, true, 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 true. My tests are all passing. Okay, I've got some confidence now that A, they ran, and B, they're all correct. So this is another design consideration for a testing framework. I don't want it to be completely silent. I don't want it to drown me in noise. But on the other hand, I'd like some sort of an indication that my tests are actually running. When we take a look at NOS this afternoon, the NOS testing framework, you'll see that it tries to find a balance between those two. You get some indication that stuff is being tested, but it doesn't shout unless it needs attention. Okay? So, I'm going to divert for 5 minutes, and then I'll come back to what I plan to do. Okay? I'll divert for 5. We'll give you a break to grab some coffee, and then I'll come back to what I plan to do. The question we had was, if I now have this function, and I want to run it in the interpreter and just type at it interactively, how do I get at it? Let me run a Python interpreter. Okay? Now, the function is called allPositives. So what I'm going to do, since it's in a file, Tuesday.py, tue.py, okay, that's the name of the file it's in, tue.py, I can say import tue. And it goes off and it loads that program. It executes all of the statements in the program. So as it's reading it in, it says, right, first thing is a function definition, all positives. Second thing is print the result of a test, print the result of a test. Okay? It's actually executing that code. Most of the time in a library, a Python file you're intending to use as a library, all you will have is function definitions. So all it will do is say, right, define this, define this, define this, define this. If you've got a bunch of debugging print statements and so forth, you'll see them as you load the library. It's generally considered rude. It doesn't do any damage. It's just if you import the math library, you don't want to see 300 lines of output telling you that the square root function works correctly in 35 different cases, and so on. So let's come back into our, let's get out of here. Come back and change those print statements back to asserts, now that we're sure our code is working. Run the Python interpreter, import Tuesday. Right. Now, I call that function by saying Tuesday.allPositives of 1, minus 1, 3, minus 3. And it gives me back 1 and 3. That is the name of the file I want to load, without the .py extension. Okay? It can be any Python file. There's no distinction between a source file and a library. If it's Python, you can import it into other Python programs. Okay? And of course, you can do this in Python programs that are in files. It's not restricted to working from the interpreter. You can put import statements in files, and they will go and load other files as they themselves are being run. Then I say name of file dot thing I want to call. Exactly the same syntax as a method like list.append or list.sort. Right. That's the thing, and I want to do that. Why the two-part syntax? Well, I'm going to imagine that you've written a library that does filtering. Okay. What's your favorite filter on audio files? Bandpass, a low-pass filter. Self-esteem issues coming to the fore here. Okay, yeah, let's just throw away all the high points. It's the weather that does it. Okay, so you've written a module, and it has a function low pass. You've also written a Python file, and it also defines low pass. Right? So if I load both of those, I have to make it really clear whose low pass function I'm calling. Right? Fred.lowpass or John.lowpass. Right? And that's why it's the two-part name. That's the module, and that's the function within the module. Because otherwise you get what is called name collision. You both define the same name. I've got to be really clear which one I'm talking to. Now, in Python, if I can also do this. I'll show you a better way to do it, and then I'll show you a way that works and is popular but is a really bad idea. Okay? The Lady Gaga of imports. So, I could run my Python interpreter, and I could say, from Tuesday, import all positives. And now I just say all positives of 1350. Okay? If I know there's not going to be a name collision, or if I know that this is the only one I actually want, and I don't want to keep typing the library name dot the function name, I want to get rid of the extra typing, I can say from that, load that up, and then I just call it by its naked name. I don't have to give the module name. Okay? It's exactly the same function. It's loaded the same way, but this way I've saved myself typing TUE dot in front of the function name all the time. Seems like a small saving in this case, but library names are often, fairly lengthy to be expressive. Bloomquist filters dot bandpass is a lot more typing than bandpass. And if I know there's only one bandpass that I care about, I just say from Bloomquist filters import bandpass, and then I can just call bandpass. Okay? A matter of aesthetics. I know people who would only ever do it with module name dot function name. Right? But these are people who would be upset that these flyers weren't lined up with the corner of the desk. And at this point, they'd probably be reaching for the little ruler they have in their pocket. Right? There are people who are like that. It's a matter of personality more than it's a matter of programming. I can also, if I want, do this. Let's get another Python interpreter. Okay. From Tuesday, import everything. And now I can just say all positives of 1, 0, minus 1. Okay. Just as I said, from Tuesday, import a specific function like all positives, the star means get them all. Don't care what they're called, just load them all up and make them all directly callable so I don't have to refer to any of them by module name. You will see this in a lot of programs. It is a bad idea. Okay. Here's why it's a bad idea. Suppose that I grab John's library and I have John dot, and I say from John import star to get the low pass function, because it's the only function in his library. Right? Not just low self-esteem, but low productivity as well, too, for the price of one. So, I say from John import star, because I can't be bothered to type from John import low pass. And now, in my program, I can just say low pass, and I use that function. Right? I similarly said from Frank import star, because when I got the first version of Frank's library, the only thing it defined was high pass. Okay? Let's close those windows because people are shivering. Clearly, there are some non-Canadians in the room. And then I'll come back to my example. I don't know if you know this, but in northern Canada, and I don't mean the far north, in sort of January, February, you can actually buy petrol by the kilo because they sell it in bricks. I'm not making this up. Right? You put a bucket in the back seat, you put a couple bricks of petrol in that, you wait for it to melt, and then you pour it into the gas tank. Right? Built tough, not smart. So, we think of it as relentless IQ testing. Right? We're giving you the opportunity to let Darwin come and knock on your door every single day in the far north. So, anyway, come back here. Okay? From, I can't remember which one you, Frank and Mark? Okay. John, sorry. John and Frank. Okay. So, from John import star, because when I got the first version of John, John only defined low pass. Okay? From Frank import star, because when I got the first version of Frank, Frank only defined high pass. Now they both go and they upgrade their libraries. You define a high pass and you define a low pass. So you've now got the same names that the other person is using. My code now has a problem. Because when I say from Frank import star, I'm now getting high pass and low pass. Right? When I say from John import star, I'm also getting high pass and low pass. There is a rule about which one I'll actually wind up with in my program. Python won't say you're defining the name twice. It'll just take one or the other. But I don't know which. I can figure it out. There's a manual. But I shouldn't have to rely on that. You have to future-proof your programs just a little bit. And that's why import star is a bad idea. It works today because you can go and look at the files and say, yep, they don't have any names in common, so it's safe to save myself a few characters of typing and let the reader guess what the hell I'm importing from this library, because there's nothing here to tell you. Okay? But then I say, oh, they've got a new version. They fixed some bugs, and woohoo, I'm going to import that. I'm going to stick that on my desk. I'm going to load it up. And now, silently, without warning me, it's stomping on something I got from a different library, and my code is no longer doing what I think it does. Have fun debugging that. Again, engineering trade-offs. In a language like Java, if I tried to do the equivalent of this, the syntax is quite different, but the idea is the same. The compiler says, it's ambiguous. I don't know which one you're referring to. You have to give me more information. It prevents you from doing it at all. In Python, it says, you're a grown-up, you know what you're doing. If you don't, you shouldn't be using Python. So I'm just going to let you do what you told me to do, even if in many cases it's the wrong thing. Forgiveness versus permission. Okay? So this is something you will see in a lot of example code. If you know exactly what's in the library, and the library is stable, and the names that this library defines aren't likely to be used elsewhere, sure. I admit that sometimes when I'm not in front of students, I import star. Right? There are times when I don't put on my seatbelt when we're driving. Right? But in general, this is a bad idea.